Hello, everyone, and welcome back to WABAN, the movie and TV show podcast where an expert on the subject discusses things with an average viewer. I am your host, Nim, and I am joined by Light Turner.
Hey Ryuk, I wish my bully got decapitated.
Hey Ryuk, I'm gonna use my death note to help me get laid.
As soon as I realized his name was Light Turner, my immediate thought was, that's an unholy amalgamation between Light Yagami and Timmy Turner.
Oh,
So
that's funny.
The entire time I was just thinking, Ryuk's his fairy godparent.
Nice. You just make that connection. Well, I mean, making connections like that definitely probably makes it more entertaining to watch because you're like trying to make, yeah. So like, I didn't mind the change in name because like I was like, okay, you're obviously changing it so that it's American, takes place in America. All the characters are American, so it wouldn't make sense for his last name to be Yagami, obviously. So like I didn't mind that, but yeah.
I mean, it's fun. It did bother me just because I kept thinking Timmy Turner.
Right. So interesting thing with this movie is like one thing I will say about this movie is first off, what I'm going to say is it's not as bad as I expected. It is bad.
Are you
but
sure?
It's not as bad as I expected. I was expecting worse. I mean, it is pretty bad. But one thing I will commend the movie on is it tried to do something different. It didn't just copy the original, which is good. Because if all you do is just tell the story exactly the same as the original, it's kind of pointless, right? It's like, oh, it's just a worse version of the same story. This is basically a different story, right? Like they take the same basic setup and characters and tell a completely different story, which I am fully on board with because that's good. You're doing something different. It makes it unique. It makes it its own thing.
But also, they kind of should have led with that, right? They should have been like, yeah, this is a Death Note spin-off movie, not a Death Note movie.
I mean, yeah, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I'm fine with it generally because it's like, oh, let's just imagine this takes place in an alternate universe outside of the regular Death Note, whatever. But the problem is some of the changes they did make, because they changed the characters a lot, especially Light. I think.
My God. I just want to make this very clear. We looked up this movie beforehand to get a little bit of idea of how bad it is or what it was about. And I remember watching the Netflix preview of it, of when you're just scrolling through the movie itself. Yeah. And I remember seeing their L walk up on stage in the middle of a public space on live television in a hoodie and a turtleneck and just thinking, what the hell is this? That's not L. And then I watched the movie and I realized, oh no, L's the most accurate character.
Oh, he is. Well, Ryuk is actually decently accurate too, I think. I think besides the main thing that's different with Ryuk, I think, is that he's kind of heavily encouraging Light to use the Death Note instead of the other way around, where Light just naturally used it and Ryuk's like, oh, this is fun. But other than that,
it's supposed to just be the guy watching is getting entertainment out of it and laughing along with everything.
Which generally is kind of what he's like. And I think Willem Dafoe was a great person to voice him. I really think, to play Ryuk.
Yeah.
I think Willem Dafoe is definitely a great choice for it. And he generally looks pretty good. He looks fine, I think. He looks kind of creepy. A lot of the shots, it's a cool way to do him in live action where some of the shots are creepy looking and this.
Yeah, they don't
generally he looks fine.
Showing.
Yeah.
He's so they just always hiding in the shadows, all creepy But
also he's barely in the movie.
Oh yeah,
I feel I wanted more of Willem Dafoe's Ryuk because I thought it was a pretty good version of Ryuk. I liked, but yeah, no, you're right though. Out of L and Light, L is the most accurate. for sure. He
I mean,
looks very different, but that's, again, that's just how the character looks. That's not like it's whatever. Again, it's an American version, so he looks like he's American, right?
If we go through all the characters, like L's like, acts a bit different. He's all shaky now, which wasn't a thing in the anime.
Well, also the end where he like chases him down with a gun. L would not go insane and do that. Now, it is implied that the reason he's kind of going insane is because Watari dies, and that kind of throws him off his rocker a little bit. But still,
but like, other than that, he's pretty close to anime L.
Right.
And then Watari suddenly becomes this like Shaolin monk master dude that's like really like, straight stanced and firm in everything that he does.
Right. I also found it strange that he's just kind of going around throwing his name around like, "Hi, I am Watari," and giving his card with his name. I'm like, okay, you're like boss, right? Your guy that you work with, L, is literally has this theory that like, oh, he needs a name to kill. He needs a name to kill. And you're just throwing your name out everywhere.
Yeah.
Also, like, does he not have a last name? Because he writes Watari in the Death Note.
And it
just
works.
Watari.
Yeah, no last name.
I was like, okay, interesting.
But then there's Light, which is like suddenly has a moral compass that's actually like very firm, and he isn't okay with using the Death Note at all.
Well, so he's very specific on using the Death Note only on bad people, which is not accurate to the original L, or Light, I mean. Also, he seems to be like, it seems like Mia, which I'm, obviously is supposed to be like Misa, but they change it to an American name, which makes sense, Mia. It seems like Mia is the more like sociopathic one who's like, let's just kill, like she's the one who's like, we need to kill your dad, we need to kill this person, and he's like, no, it's not, and she's the one who kills all the FBI agents. But at the end of the day, like on one hand, it's like, okay, you know what? They're taking the characters in a different direction because it's they're trying to do something completely different. So it's fine to make some changes, but at the same time, the changes they do make cause the character to be a much weaker, less interesting character. Because that was what made Light interesting, was that his first off, his intelligence, which is not really there in this. He's kind of an idiot.
Like the last scene, basically.
Like, hey, let me just sit out here in middle of the gym at school and use the Death Note in front of everybody, to the point where somebody can see that it says Death Note on the front of it from a distance. Yeah, let me just...
And the first person that asks me about it, I'm going to take them aside and show them everything about it.
Well, right. Because he wants to impress her, to be like, because he likes her. Like, that's literally it. Which, like, again, that turns him into, like, an average high school student who's like just wants to get laid, and which is like,
that's an interesting idea,
kind of, but not really, because like that's a normal person. The thing that made the character like, there's nothing like, if you're gonna change the character, change it to something that makes for an interesting character. I feel like he's not. He's just an average. He seems more like an average high school student. Like, yeah, he gets good grades and stuff. We saw at the beginning that he like helps people cheat on tests and stuff.
But what I think would be interesting is like, the average high schooler gaining the Death Note and it going from there. But they still didn't really do that. They did it at first, and like, oh my God, I just murdered my bully. And then he panics and like goes to show his crush about it and blah blah blah, and then that segment just kind of fell off immediately. Right,
and sort of fell right away into, all right, now we're just going to try to kill everyone who's bad in the world. Okay, cool, and become the god of the world, And it's like, it's weird, because it's like, I feel like at the beginning of the movie, I was actually like, okay, I'm actually kind of interested. It's different the way they're setting it up. He's a very different character. He's terrified of Ryuk when he shows up, and he needs some some persuasion to kill people because he's a little hesitant with it. Okay, so it's different. But I was like, okay, maybe this will be interesting because I'm glad that it's different. But then as it goes, it just kind of goes off the rails, and they kind of drop any of the interesting things they did set up, and just kind of becomes this weird, like, I don't know, convoluted story that a lot of it doesn't even make that much sense.
Yeah, like how Ronald immediately reveals his face to Light after accusing him of being Kira.
Yeah. Well, also, like,
what?
Obviously, so L's thing was always like, okay, so nobody's ever seen his face. Nobody can identify who he is. Nobody even knows what he looks like in the original. In this, he just kind of walks around crime scenes with a mask on, like, oh, nobody can tell what I look like because I have this mask covering my nose and a hood on. Haha. Like, it's just so weird. Yeah. Like, it's just it's so lame.
It's a budget L.
Yeah, it is. It's like
very, both Light and L in this movie are like B- compared to like the S tier of
the thing that made it so interesting is that they're both characters who are extremely intelligent and extremely good at what they do. You know what I mean? Who are very who think about every little detail. And it was like that back and forth of like, take two people who are like that level of intelligence, two of the smartest, like most thoughtful, like people in the world who think about little details stuff, and put them against each other. Right.
Yeah. And
this, it's like, you never feel that level of intelligence with the characters. Like,
no.
L's like in the original show, L's big moment of showing like how good he is like he played that trick on Light, or on Kira, because I guess he doesn't know that he's Light yet, on Kira, to figure out where the general area he lives in, by like having Lindell Taylor show up and say that he's L, and then he kills him, and then it's like, it was actually a pretty smart thing. And you're like, oh wow, this guy's good. And this, his first like big thing that he does to show how smart he is goes, I have determined that Kira is in fact not in Japan, and that using the name Kira was just a trick to make people think that he's in Japan. What? Wow. So genius. Like, it's like, that's his big first genius moment.
Yeah. And as the audience, you're just thinking, okay, how?
Well, it's that, but also like, okay, like that's not that intelligent. Like, if you think about it, like, okay, so he goes, I'm using the name Kira because it means killer in Japanese. So I want everybody to think that I'm in Japan. And somehow that works. Like, everybody just assumes he's in Japan because of that. Like, come on. Like, anybody could look up and be like, oh, what's the Japanese word for killer? Like, or what is, or I guess it like sort of means killer in Japanese. Yeah. It's not like exactly.
It sort of means it in the movie, but in reality, it's just kind of like how the Japanese would pronounce the American word killer.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't really exactly know. Yeah,
it's not
how that
really
works
accurate at all.
Yeah, but like, even if it is accurate, like, even if it is kind of mean killer in Japanese, that's still like such a dumb, like, oh, I'm gonna throw them off so hard. But it works. Somehow he throws off every law enforcement agency in the world. Like, everybody's just assumes he's in Japan now. Because of that.
They don't make L seem smart. They make everyone else seem dumb.
Right. So then L comes in and he makes this big revelation of like, he is not in Japan. Whoa, you're so smart. Even though it's like, okay, like, great. Whatever.
You've rubbed two brain cells together. Congratulations.
Well, because he figures out that he's in Seattle because he's like, I actually determined that this person was his first victim, not who you thought it was. And this person's thing was only broadcasted in Seattle, on Seattle News or whatever. So he figures out that he's in Seattle. Okay. Which is like, similar to how he figured out where he was in the original show. He figured it out because the person who died was only broadcasted in, the Kanto region of Japan, whatever. But like, I don't know. It's just kind of the way to get there is just kind of thrown in there, and you're just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, in the anime, there was this really nice build-up of them getting closer and closer to each other. And, like, the movie obviously can't do that because it's a lot shorter in total time spent on it.
Right,
But
right.
it's still just... They rushed it, still.
Well, yeah, like their first meeting with each other was kind of lame as well. Because, like, so...
Who just pops up in, like, a coffee shop, and that's it.
Right, because, like, if you think about, like, their first meetings, their very first meetings with each other in the show, like, that time they're just kind of sitting there eating, and he's, like... They're very calm and calculating, both of them. They're having a conversation, thinking about every little detail. But this, like, conversation just, like... First, he accuses him of being Kira right away, which is like, okay, whatever. And then the conversation just devolves into them screaming and yelling at each other. And like this, like, I'm like, really? Like, it's just kind of like, again, it's like, I'm okay with them making changes, but like, this is just lame. This is just dumb. These are supposed to be smart people.
Once again, they should have just said, yeah, this is like a completely different story. And, like, I feel like what happened in the storyboard of this room, or this movie, is the one person who watched the anime or read the manga or whichever that was in the room got to what the Death Note was and the names of some key characters. And then everyone else in the room started talking over them.
Right, gave them the basic plot line of, like, so yeah, and then, yeah. And then he also mentioned there's also this girl named Misa who helps him, who's kind of on his side helping him, and they're just like, that's all they got with her.
Mia?
You know?
Oh yeah, we'll make her like really manipulative. Like, what? That's not what I said at all.
Her character's it's actually funny because like in the original show, so like Misa is like an extreme light simp, right? She's like extremely simping for light. In this, it's kind of almost flipped, not to the same extreme, but like light is kind of simping for her, for Mia a little bit.
And
like,
and
she's the one who's a little bit more extreme about their plan to kill all the evil people. She's more extreme about that.
Yeah, it's kind of like refreshing, but it's not done well. So
yeah. And you know what? She's not as annoying as she is in the show, I guess. You know, she's not like as really obnoxious, annoying character, I guess. So that's fine.
I mean,
but it's also
she's annoying in a different way. She's not annoying in the way that like she's always there being like hyperactive or anything. She's annoying in the way that like she's very clearly trying to control Light in the way he's doing his killings.
Right.
Like, she even puts his name in the Death Note and tries to kill him unless he gives her the notebook.
Which,
like, that's...
Okay, so he writes down... This is really confusing. They kind of, like, play around with the rules of the Death Note in weird ways. Okay. So, like, in that scene at the end, so he writes down her name, right? And he writes down, she will die if she takes the Death Note from me. But like, since when has it mentioned that you could write conditions for death? Like, you will only die if this happens. Like, usually it's you write somebody's name, they die unless the way of dying that you wrote was impossible to happen or whatever. Okay. But like, since when can you just write this person will die if they do this? If not, then they won't die. Like, since when were you able to do that? Like, it's like if
we ignore the anime, that was never mentioned in the movie itself either.
Yeah, exactly, right. They changed the rules a little bit in the movie, which is fine because it serves their plot a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, like you could burn a page and save somebody and whatever, which is like...
But only once.
Only once, right? Just, yeah, I mean, you know, I think that's fine. There's a lot of like arbitrary rules even in the show that are just kind of there just to be there, whatever. So it's like, okay, you know what? And they made that rule to serve the plot that they went with for this movie. So I was generally okay with that. But it was kind of a weird rule, but like, but again, like it's just kind of weird, like how much control you can have over the situation with just like, obviously you can control people for up to, I don't know, what is it, 48 hours before they die?
Yeah, it was 2 days,
or something. 2 days, yeah. which I think is similar to the show. I don't know if it was exactly 2 days in the show, but it was, generally.
Yeah,
but
it was a few days length, I think.
But like, there's so many like little details that you can control. Like she specifically tore this page out of this. When she's falling, she's going to tear this specific page with my name on it out of the notebook, and it's going to fall into fire. And like, I mean, I guess there's no rule saying you couldn't write that down in somebody else's like death, but like, it's very like specific what you can write about somebody's death. Like it's
2 other people that he programmed their deaths and for them to save him beforehand and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's very like weird. Well, also like you have to, in order for controlling people to work, it has to be something that somebody could do on their own, come up with on their own.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this random guy know where to find the notebook? It's weird, or know who like Light Turner is and where to bring it in the hospital. Like how can he come up with that on his own? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't make sense.
That the anime did very well, because there's a lot of questions that you can come up with about the limitations of the notebook, and what does it count as a plausible death or a plausible action or blah blah blah. But they specifically seem to avoid that so it doesn't get confusing. But this movie doesn't.
Right.
And so it does get very confusing.
Well, it does, and this movie even does state that it has to be something that's plausible to happen for them to come up with and whatever. So, but then they go out of their way to not do that because, like, okay, yeah, so like he, which for part of it they do because Watari calls him and Watari doesn't know L's real name, so therefore he can't give him the real name.
Mm-hmm.
But then he tells him to go get the name, access the name, which was like a whole thing. But it's like, but then again, at the end, it's like this guy's just like, oh, this guy picks up the notebook and gives it to me. It's like, okay, how does this random dude know where you are in the hospital, know your name, know where to bring it? Like that doesn't, that's not something he could just think of on his own, or know where to find the death note, or like, there was another guy who had a specific thing that he was supposed to do. What was it? I don't remember.
Do you mean like pulling him out of the ocean and bringing him to the hospital? That guy?
Yeah. Was there the
doctor that pulled him out of the water, brought him to the hospital, and he even programmed his own coma for 2 days specifically, which is weird. But also there was the mailman that he made to pick up the death note and bring it to him.
Right, that's right. Yeah, see, that's the one that's a little confusing, because like a guy happening to walk by and pull him out of the water, I guess that's something you could do on your own, because like he's somebody who would like, oh, if he sees you in the water, if he sees somebody in the water that he can save and bring to the hospital, I guess that's something you could come up with on your own. But like still, like the bringing the death note specifically to his room and like, I don't know, it was just very specific. Also, like he wakes up and his dad's like, he's like, I think are you really cured? He's like, yeah. You want me to tell you how I did all this? This is what I did. Like he just tells his dad everything. So like,
it's so weird.
It's just like he tells people things way too easily. Again, in the beginning, Mia comes up and she's like, "What's that? Death note? What's that?" And she's like, and he's like, "Oh, he knows that she like is okay with what Kira's doing, and she's like all for that kind of thing because he knows that." So she's like, "Oh, if she knows this, she'll wanna, So he just tells her, it's like,
I'm gonna kill a man to get laid.
It's like I'm sorry. This is the character that this movie wants us to think is like super smart. Like, come on.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Because like generally speaking, I think the main issue with this movie, a lot of it's just the plot is the issue. Because a lot of it, like the acting is all fine. I think the acting's all good and fine. I don't think there's any issues with the acting. The way it's shot, the shots all look nice, look good and professional.
I remember being very impressed with the effects. One, with how Ryuk looks.
Yeah.
And two, the gore effects. I don't know. I really liked them. They look
they
great.
generally look good, and the main issue is the plot and the writing and the characters and how the characters are written and stuff that I think is what really brings the movie down. So, it's not like an Avatar, it's not like the Last Airbender situation where it's like everything is just bad, where it's like even down to like the acting and the fight choreography, the CGI, like every little thing
where they just forgot to put in the water stream.
Right, they don't have right. Like I think this movie is more competent than The Last Airbender, like in a general sense. I just think that the script is not good. The script is what really let this movie down.
Yeah, they should refine that a lot more.
Right.
But also, just from a fan perspective, I think it would have been a lot better if they just went and didn't use any of the characters' names and just been like, yeah, these are all completely new characters.
Yeah, or like...
Now when you're watching the movie, you're constantly thinking about the characters from the anime.
Yeah.
And you're just like, these aren't them. These are completely different.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could take it in a sense of like, oh, this is like... like you could still maybe use Ryuk, I guess, because he's the type of person who would just drop a death note to see what happens. Okay, whatever. Like you could make it take place in the same universe.
Yeah.
So it has the same.
Like, this is him, putting on an act for the person who has the death note, so he can get as much fun out of it as possible.
Right. Because and still cast Willem Dafoe, whatever. And like, I don't think the actors are the issue. The actors are all fine, whatever. But again, yeah, make them different characters, and then also really change the script, because I think there's definitely something there, something interesting that they could pull from this.
They have like the general idea of a good story, and then they just ruined it as they fleshed it out, it seems like.
Yes, exactly. Like in those first few scenes, I was actually kind of like, oh, like I don't mind this. This is fine. This is, this could be interesting to see where they go. Because I could tell they were going to go very different than the show. So I was like, okay, I'm interested to see where they go with this. But then it just goes so off the rails to the point where it's like... like they definitely had interesting stuff here, interesting concepts, interesting ideas, but it just like, again, having the character who's using the death note, having a girlfriend who's kind of trying to manipulate him to do more evil stuff with it. That could be interesting.
That's a great idea.
Having
the, top detective in the world who nobody knows the identity of, walk around in a hoodie and a mask. Not a great idea.
Such a great idea. It's like...
Or immediately revealing his face to the guy who he thinks needs a face to kill. Not a great idea.
Well, yeah, that's... yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think in general it was... Yeah. And like, again, the actors are fine. Like the actor who played his dad was fine, I think, He... Yeah. But they also
I have no problem with the movie besides just the fact that it's... I kept thinking of this. There's an anime called Soul Eater, and it has a spin-off called Soul Eater Not. And I think that's a great way to describe this movie. It's Death Note Not.
Right. Yeah, again, they can definitely use the concept of Death Note, and they make it, again, like a spin-off that takes place in the same general franchise, but in America. Like, oh, this American person who's not the same person picked up the Death Note. What happens with it?
Yeah.
Or like...
Instead of trying to shoehorn them into the anime characters.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the main issue with it. And yeah, and like I was gonna say something about it, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, no, I can agree with that though. I hate when I like just blank on something. I completely forgot what I was gonna say.
About the characters, about the story itself.
I think it was something with like the characters or something, but I don't remember.
The names of the characters? Just because that's...
Oh, this is what it was. Yeah. So they another change they made was the idea, a few things. One, Light is an only child in this, and also his mother died previously from she was murdered by somebody. So this is actually a change that I think was a good change. I think that was an interesting idea to explore of like the reason, like, you know, that could help explain why he would decide to try to kill evil people, because somebody who he considers an evil person killed his mother, and that was actually the second person he killed in it. So that was an interesting concept. I liked that, and you know, it was fine because I was like, okay, his mother wasn't like a particularly important, interesting character in the original show anyways, so sure, make it that she died before the story starts. It definitely added like an emotional sort of level to it, where it's like, again, that's part of what his drive to kill bad people.
Yeah,
was because of what happened to his mother.
It's like sort of the beginning spark that ignites it all.
It's sort of like a fucked up Batman origin story, right? Where like Batman's, you know, his parents died, and that's part of were killed by a criminal, and that's part of what drives him to want to fight crime. But instead, it's like not the, you know, because obviously Batman doesn't kill. He has his rule. He is a very
It's like if Batman decided to immediately take revenge and then thought like, oh, I could do this before the bad stuff happened, and went and killed all the bad people.
Right. It's if Batman was okay with killing and also got a death note. Yeah. Except Batman would be way more smart with how to use it, because he's much more intelligent than Light Turner is.
Not a horny teenager.
Not a horny, but like, yeah. But no, that was definitely, again, it's one of those things where there's a lot of interesting things that they put in here that could really be something interesting. But then they just, by this, I think it's like around somewhere like the second half or so of the movie, it just goes off the rails. And it's like they have this whole separate thing with Watari trying to find Elle's real name, which was kind of a lame thing they were doing. And then, and then like Elle is just kind of chasing Light through the streets haphazardly with a gun. And you're just like, really? Like, you're going to do this whole chase sequence thing? Come on. Like, that's not very Death Note real. Like, it's just kind of like they just start throwing all this stuff in, like, and then they go to meet on a Ferris wheel, which is like probably the worst place to meet, because it's like, you know, easy to get trapped there. Yeah. Which, like, yes, we find out that like it was part of Light's plan, because he was going to make it that she fell and died, but he didn't, and whatever. But like, which that moment at the end was definitely supposed to be a nod to like how Light was in the show, where it was like all this crazy stuff would happen, and you'd be like, what's happening? Light, like the audience wouldn't know what's going on. They'd be like, whoa, what's Light planning? What's Light planning? And then at the end, when it all happens, Light would reveal what his plan was, and you'd be like, oh, it's definitely supposed to be one of those moments. But the plan was so ridiculous and stupid that it was just kind of more like really? That was your plan?
Yeah. And there's so many details in it. It's just like, there's no if clauses in the Death Note. What do you mean?
Yeah, like that's like, never been set up.
The information that we needed to appreciate this.
Even if that was like, even if they did establish that rule, I would think it was a pretty dumb rule anyways. Like, I feel like that just opens up so many more possibilities that are just really, like, it really just makes it weird. I don't know. I liked the restrictions of the Death Note. It makes it more like Light really has to think outside the box with how to use it properly and use it in a smart, intelligent way.
Because in the anime, all the rules are like, this is how it works. You need to write it in this time frame. It happens this many seconds afterwards, and all this stuff. And he only just finds like the slightest wiggle room. I can't talk. Wiggle room in all of it, of like tearing off pages or scraps of pages and stuff like that.
Yeah, and as soon as he like determines that like, oh, it can only be something that's possible to happen. He utilizes that. He's like, okay, so he really thinks about, because if it's something that they couldn't do on their own, they'll just die of a heart attack and won't do so he kind of like has to really think about those things, like like when the guy on the bus who hijacked the bus jacker, he's like he writes in the death note, he sees a monster and he's scared. Well, that couldn't normally happen. Oh wait, it can happen if he touches the death note piece and then sees Ryu. Yeah. So therefore it can happen. So he's thinking of all these little, like, it makes it more interesting because there's restrictions and he has to work within those restrictions. And in this show, or in this movie, there's definitely restrictions. Like, obviously you need a name and a face and the normal stuff, but there's also like, he can just kind of be like all this random, like, he can write this if she does this, she dies. If not, she doesn't die. Like, how, like, he just throws in all this extra stuff where it's like, you can just do this now. Like, okay.
Suddenly the Death Note is just a Java program. It's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, they also, another change that I just thought about that they made, which I don't really know how I feel about this change. Like, I'm iffy on it. Like, I feel like in this movie, it really didn't change anything. Like, if they did it this way or not. But that was that only the person who owns the Death Note can see the Shinigami.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you touch it, you still can't see it. So Mia never was able to see Ryuk. No other characters. I don't know how I feel about that change, because I feel like in this movie that never really came into play in any important way anyway. So like,
yeah, not really.
It really didn't matter whether it was that way or not.
It was just the kind of thing that nobody could appreciate Ryuk besides Light.
Right.
It's just
but
like, okay.
I think one reason why they might have done that is so that, like, if they ever make sequels, because they're obviously planning on it. I don't know if they're still doing. I read somewhere that they were still going to make a second one, but I don't know if that's true or not. I just read it somewhere. But they were going to obviously plan on doing more than one movie. And if that was the case, maybe that would come to play where, like, they didn't, if like the people investigating got a hold of the notebook, they didn't want them to be able to see Ryuk for their way they were going to play out the story. So maybe that's why they established that.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Okay. Two things. First of all, you mentioned the restrictions about how, he needs a name and a face. They don't ever play with that in this movie at all.
Right. That's what I mean. That's why I was thinking. With the where you need a name and a face. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. The main thing about the Death Note, they don't mess with that at all in this movie.
Yeah, I guess the closest thing was like, in order to kill L, he needed his name, so he did this whole thing with Watari to try to find out L's name. But they don't really play around with the idea. Yeah, they don't really play around with the idea of, like, you need a name and a face. They played around with the idea of you need a name, but not necessarily the idea that you need both name and face.
Well, like, those two rules were the same when they went through the rules, like, first thing when he found the Death Note. But it was just like, this is an important thing. This is like the main deal with the Death Note, and you're just gonna, just glance over it like that?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it just naturally didn't come up in the story they ended up telling, but as much. But
I just think it was a prime plot point that they just ignored outright.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly.
But also, at the very end, Elle remembers a little line that Light said about a scrap of paper being a calculus book, and he finds the scrap of the paper of the Death Note. And he goes to write Light's name on it, right? That was the implication.
Oh, yeah, that scene makes no fucking sense.
Right then and there with the Death Note.
So that was definitely supposed to be like a ambiguous moment. Will he write the name? Will he not? I don't know, kind of thing at the end, which could be an interesting way to end the movie, but it also makes no freaking sense because Elle has never seen the Death Note, read the rules. He has no clue that this paper is from a Death Note where you can write somebody's name down and kill them. All he sees is that there's names of people who have died. Well, that doesn't mean that's how they died. Like, he could have just had a list of people that he was killing for some reason.
Right.
Like, how does he...
The information he has is the little line that he remembers from Light that said, like, you can't stop it once it's written down or whatever. Oh,
that's right. Yeah, there's that. But then also he saw before the paper burnt up of Light's name, he saw Light's name on it, said, Light Turner, dies of a heart attack, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, he has no way, but like, that doesn't help prove it because, well, Light didn't die. So obviously that doesn't prove anything. So like, yeah, maybe that line stuck with him where he was said that. And then like, he's thinking that.
I don't know. But like, sure, you can stretch it just enough that he might be able to figure it out and write down Light's name. But also, even beyond that, of just the scene itself, just having this ambiguous moment ending of, will he write the name down? Will he not? Is Light about to die right in front of his dad? Why is Ryuk laughing over there? Is it because humans are interesting because he didn't do it or because he did do it? It's just like, I'm not invested in this movie enough to actually do it right now.
Right, exactly. That's what the thing is like, if they had done it well and set that moment up really well, it could have been a really good way to end the movie. Like an interesting, cliffhanger, kind of like, ooh. Because, sometimes it's fun when a movie ends on sort of an ambiguous note where you're like, ooh, maybe this will happen. Maybe this will happen. I don't know. But like, you have to earn that. And this movie just doesn't. It's like,
you have to hook the fish before you reel it in. They just never hooked the fish.
Right, exactly. Well, they started to. At the beginning of the movie, the fish was getting close. It was really close to that reel. It was about to bite. The fish was about to nibble, and then it was getting really close. Then all of a sudden, it got yanked away from the fish.
Yeah,
and then the fish then the fish swam away uninterested. Just never got close to it again.
This is only a fishing podcast. Let's go.
Just start reviewing fishing poles on the podcast. That's our thing now. Yeah. There was something else I was gonna bring up, like another interesting. There was another interesting thing that was like so there was the scene where the FBI agents died. And at first you think, oh, Light did it, but then you realize Light didn't kill them. And then he goes to Ryuk and assumes Ryuk did it. Now, at first when that happened, I was like, really? They're going to make it that Ryuk is like intervening? Come on. Like, like, I think Ryuk is
ruined Ryuk.
Right. Like, even if you're going to change the other characters because it's a different movie, like, I feel like that's a character that like, should always stay the same. Like, I don't know. He's just that type of character to me. Like, that's the way I think.
Or at the very least, his main character point should be the same, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, come on, that's a character that should stay the same. But, they did later on reveal that it was actually Mia who did it, not Ryuk. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, that's fine. I was like, okay, good. They didn't...
You've recovered slightly.
Right. That's a character. That is a character they did not ruin. So they almost did in that. I don't know. I think generally he was fine. Like they made it that like he was very much encouraging Light to kill people at the beginning, which isn't the way Ryuk was in the original. But one reason why I think that doesn't completely ruin the character is because in the original show, Ryuk didn't have to encourage him, so he just kind of stepped back. Like, Ryuk was encouraging him because he was like, if he doesn't use the Death Note, like, that'll be boring. So I'll encourage him to use it a little. I'll give him a little push, then see what happens. So I thought that was generally fine, because, like, in the original, he didn't need to, because Light just kind of did it on his own.
I guess you can just see it as him being like, oh, this guy's not going to actually entertain me, so I'm going to mess with him to find my entertainment. Yeah.
So I was generally fine with that change. Um, yeah, and then like he meets Ryuk like the day that he finds the Death Note, which is another change, which I think is generally fine. Like, I always did find the original kind of weird. I'm like, why did Ryuk wait 5 days to like meet him for the first time? Like, that's like it just seemed weird to me.
Yeah. It's definitely like an inconsequential change.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think it's fine. Like he meets Ryuk before he even uses the Death Note the first time, whereas in the original, it's like he already has been starting to kill people.
Yeah, he's already committed many massacres.
Right, yeah, exactly. So it's just a small change there. So,
oh, here was a weird thing. When they first introduced L and these like in a Japanese investigation, like a little crime scene for Kira, all the dead people are like bloodied and like scraped up and everything, and I'm just thinking, why? He can just kill by heart attack, so why is he making
he
it
doesn't.
such a bloody scene?
Well, it's shown. It never explains in this movie. It's shown that like they keep mentioning you have to specify the cause of death.
All right, because I guess with Watchery, he's like dealer's choice. He doesn't write down a name, and he gets shot.
Yeah, dealer's choice. So, like, I guess, yeah. So
I forgot that part.
So that's weird because it's like the whole thing in the original was if you don't specify, they die of heart attack. Because which makes sense because that's kind of like a nice, like a way that you can just kind of die instantly without like anything else happening. So that kind of makes sense for it to be like a heart attack, whatever. But like that was a big plot point in the original because they assumed that Kira could only kill through heart attack because all of the victims were dying from heart attacks.
Right.
So he was able to kill like other people. He was able to kill the guy, the bus jacker and stuff through something that wasn't a heart attack. So they didn't even think he was a Kira victim. And that was kind of, and then like Ray Pember's fiance was thinking, thought that Kira killed that guy, and she was going to bring the evidence of like, I think Kira doesn't have to kill by heart attack. And that was like a whole thing.
It's a whole plot point.
Right. But now it's just kind of like people can just die of random causes, which that's an interesting thing too, because in the original, one of the main reasons that they connected all the deaths and realized this was the same person was mostly because they were all heart attacks. Like, why are all these people just dying of heart attacks specifically? That seems weird. And they connected, Whereas in this, everybody's just kind of dying of random causes. So it's like harder to make the connection. But then again, in this one, it's also different because Kira kind of specifically reveals himself to the world as like, I am the one doing all these killings instead of people figuring it out. So that's also another difference.
Yeah. I don't know. Every time I try to get into a deep dive of analyzing this movie, I'm just like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's definitely a movie where like by the time you're done with it, you're just kind of like, all right, yeah, that was a thing. Okay.
An hour and a half of my life.
Like, I don't think it's like, and that's the problem is like, I don't think it's an absolutely terribly, horribly made movie. I think it's like, it's just kind of mediocre for the most part with some really dumb stuff. And then some kind of good, like the thing that annoys me is like, it definitely had potential to do something interesting with the concept.
Yeah.
And just didn't. And it's like, it's frustrating.
Points that they ruined, and they have a lot of bad points.
Right.
That they just used as is for some reason.
And I think sometimes movies like that are the most frustrating bad movies because it's like movies that have potential and have something interesting there, but just completely ruin it. What interesting thing they have, because like, again, like the Last Airbender, at least like you watch that and you're like, from the very beginning of the movie, you're like, yeah, this movie has no potential. There's nothing good here. Like there's just there's nothing where you're like, well, this could have been good if. No, it's just all horrible. Like it's like whatever. Okay, so you can just be like, yeah, whatever. They failed at making this movie. It's fun to laugh at. Ha ha. But this one, you're kind of frustrated because it's like you're like, oh, this could be interesting if they really did something, like if they really leaned into this, or if they kind of like
could have made gold here, but you just stopped. You just didn't.
Right.
You chose to make this bad.
And again, I love the fact that it did the story completely different, that it completely changed the story. I'm all for that. I think there are other live action Death Note movies. There's a few Japanese ones.
Yeah, and I think those are pretty good.
Right. From what I know, those are very accurate, like story-wise. They follow, like they literally even do the potato chip scene. I don't think it's nearly as dramatic as it is in the show, but they do it. They do the same scene. Like they follow pretty much the same story in those movies. There's only like 2 or 3. I don't know if they finished the story with those movies, like all the whole show. I know they did at least 2 movies and then like a prequel movie about L or something. I don't know. But the thing with that though is like, okay, like that's like the same story, right? So it's like, okay, you can you definitely make more comparisons there because it's trying to be the same story. So that's a very different thing than like this American version, because the American Netflix version is trying to be something completely different. And, from what I hear, like the director and like all the people working on this movie, like actually did want to make a good movie and liked Death Note and wanted to do, they again, they made it completely different on purpose to be, because they didn't want to just, repeat the same story.
Right.
But it sounded like they actually really wanted to make something good, but they just failed. Like they actually tried, and that's like what makes it more frustrating, and I think that's where a lot of those interesting ideas came up, where it's like people did have interesting ideas, it just didn't come together right.
So just somewhere on the line something went wrong.
Yeah, like something with writing the script just went off the rails,
I don't know. That's just very frustrating. Just like, yeah, it's something new and interesting, but the same premise.
And maybe if they do make a sequel, because I heard that they were making a second one. I don't know if it's true. If they do, maybe they'll make it more like the movie that they wanted to make it more like just much better. Maybe they'll fix it. I don't know. But yeah, overall, it just kind of is disappointing and again, like I say it's disappointing, like I wasn't expecting much. So it's not like, so why am I disappointed? Well, because again, the beginning, I started to get interested and then it just went downhill from there.
Right.
But yeah, because I don't want to sit here and have this review just be like us being like, well, this is different, so that's bad. This is different. Like, no, it's not bad because it's different. It's bad because it's bad.
It has no excuse to be bad. It just ended up being bad.
Right, because there's definitely like a side to things where people are always like, anytime there's an adaptation of something, they hate it. Fans hate it just because they made changes, and it's like, okay, that's like, I get it because you love the original thing, so it's like I get why people are like, people reacted that way, but at the same time, it's like you got to kind of take things on the face of like, this is an adaptation. This is different. They're making changes because it's a different thing. You still have that original thing. Like, if all you did was copy the original, what would be the point,
Right.
It's like the Disney live action remakes, people are like, you're basically just copying the original, but in a worse version. So what's the point? It's exactly. Like, why? That original exists. Why are you doing, like, unless you're making tons of changes.
I do especially understand the fans hating an adaptation in this movie in particular, though, because even though they're doing something completely different, they still try to shoehorn the characters in like with the same names and everything. So it's just
Yeah.
like, why are you just stopping at just everything and not everything and the characters?
Well, it did seem weird though too. Like, so okay, so they changed Misa's name to Mia, so that
Mm-hmm.
I can kind of detach and think of as a different character. So whatever. But like
Right.
Light, for instance, like why didn't they change his name? Because like Light is like what American is named Light?
I mean, what
Like,
Japanese person is named
I mean, I
Light?
don't know. I don't know. I don't know if Light would be a normal Japanese name, so I could be, wrong
I
on that. I
don't
don't.
believe so. However, I do get what you're saying.
But it just I was like, you could have changed, it to like maybe something the start that sounds similar, but like isn't like I don't know, like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what name would. I don't know. Maybe just starting with the same letter, so like Luke Turner or something like that. I don't know. Whatever.
I think it just would have been better if they didn't give us the idea that they were supposed to be the same characters, because
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
clearly not the same characters.
yeah,
So why make
yeah.
that false promise?
Yeah, so yeah, make them different characters. Again, maybe make Ryuk the same character. Because
I would
that's
love it if
fine.
they just like cut in like little bits of Ryuk talking to himself, being like, "My act is going great," and that little idiot thinks I'm, this weird manipulative devil person, but now I'm just a Shinigami trying to have fun.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
Well, it's
little
like because
bits of like the old Ryuk.
yeah, exactly. Well, and get more of his apple addiction. That would be fun.
Oh yeah, they really didn't go into that.
Because
He just ate apples every once in a while.
yeah, which I mean, I think is fine. Like that's not really what the movie was trying to do. They didn't have to focus on that very much or like bring it up, which is like they could reference it by having him eat apples. So I didn't mind that so much. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
generally, I think that's the only character I can think of that really isn't that much different. That's basically the same as he was.
Yeah, I mean, L starts off pretty close with like his weird habits and all that, but then it
Yes.
falls apart when he starts chasing Light with a gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
I'm
like,
like,
okay,
okay, even if L, like, I don't know. And also, like, L's control of the situation was not very high. Like, literally nobody in the police department really trusted him at all. Like, everybody was just kind of like his, like, in the original, like, Light's
yeah,
dad is like, trusts L a lot. But in this, everybody's just kind of like, L's kind of a whack job. Everybody's like, all right, by the end of the movie, they're like, we need to arrest L. He's off the rails.
yeah. There's
Like,
the whole thing of them skipping over Kira's like rise to power and just skipping straight to everybody trusts and there's a Kira religion now.
oh yeah, that was very quick. Yeah.
Immediately.
Well, I think that comes down to how short the movie was. I definitely think that's the thing that could have helped the movie too, is extending the length a little bit so you could flesh things out a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But it all felt very rushed because it was only an hour and 40 minutes. I don't know what's with these type of adaptation movies being only an hour and 40 minutes, because The Last Airbender is also only an hour and 40 minutes for some reason. I don't get it. Like, why do they like it's a movie. You can make a movie like 2.5 hours if you want. You can make a movie 2 hours and 15 minutes. You don't have to do it in an hour and 40 minutes. You could make it longer. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Like this movie really does feel like there are scenes missing. Like it really does.
Yeah.
Because there's like certain points where you're like, wait, we're at this point, Art. Or like, whoa, like it feels like a lot has happened, but
Yeah, wasn't there? They were talking about how to deal with the FBI agents, and Mia's trying to convince him to kill them. And then, like, in the next, like, scene or two, the FBI agents are dead.
Yeah, you watch them. Which now the scene of them walking up and walking off the building was kind of cool.
Oh yeah, that was pretty neat. They're just like them marching in
off
sequence
the building.
just...
That was kind of cool. I liked that.
Yeah.
But yeah, exactly. It's like everything's on fast mode, which is, that's kind of how The Last Airbender was. If you remember, where it's like everything's just like, it's like going through the plot on it's like speed running the plot, you know.
Mhm.
We're
Or
just like, okay,
narrating through
this
half of
plot
it.
point, then this plot point, then this plot point, then this plot point. All right, let's go. I think The Last Airbender was worse with that, definitely. Like, I think that the pacing was even worse than that. But it's definitely is a little bit of an issue in this movie, I think. It's like, you feel like there's scenes that were missing, scenes that were important, that were like cut or something. And you're like, why would you cut? Like, why wouldn't you have more scenes to develop, to flesh this out a little bit more? Like it's a Netflix movie. It's not playing in theaters. So you'd feel like you'd think they'd have a pretty, you know, you think they'd have a pretty high freedom on how long they're allowed to make the movie, right? You know?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Instead of just kind of, yeah. So it's just it's so weird, you know? It's like, why is it only this long? Yeah. But
what is your excuse? Why is it terrible? What happened that made it terrible?
Right.
Please explain.
Right. If they had took more time to refine the script, to really take some of those ideas and concepts that they had, refine the script, maybe change it so it's not the same characters, and make it longer to help develop everything more, develop character relationships, to just develop it a little bit more. That would have that's all you would really need to do to greatly improve this. Again, the cast is fine. The general, you know, like
the plot points are really good.
Yeah.
They can work well in a good story. You just didn't use them properly. Gotta use them properly.
Right. I think it all mostly comes down to the script. That is the big issue with this movie, I think. But yeah. Okay, I'm pretty much ready to be done talking about it if you are.
Yeah.
I think
just thinking about this is just kind of
ready to stop beating this dead horse. The script is bad. That's our conclusion on this movie. We'll move on. Next week, we will hopefully be talking about a better movie. Well, we will. So next week, we're actually going to be talking about the movie that Artur recommended to us, which is Zodiac, David Fincher movie. We've already watched Fight Club, which is another David Fincher movie. So that's good. So that gives me high hopes for it, like knowing that it's David Fincher, knowing this is the director of Fight Club. We both love Fight Club. So, so that's awesome. And then after that, I'm not exactly sure. We might be having a guest the week after that. It's still kind of up in the air. So I'm not really going to
maybe who knows?
Yes. So I already have somebody that might be a guest. I'm not really going to say, because I don't want to say that we're having a guest unless it's more certain. So next week, I will probably know for sure. So I will let you know then. But yeah, so anyways, thank you for listening to this week's episode of WABAN. If you want, you can check out the WABAN YouTube channel. There will be a link in the description to that. I am slowly sort of working on putting up every podcast episode up on that channel. So once I catch up, I'll start doing, whatever the new one is every week, but I haven't caught up with putting everything up there yet. I'm still in the process of doing that. So it won't be available on Nim TV anymore, on my YouTube channel, Nim TV. You can still check out my YouTube channel if you want. I'm kind of have some things in the works of content. I might not have a new video until the new year. I'm thinking of hopefully in the new year, kind of starting to up my content, do more like once a month. I was going to say once a week, not once a week. Yeah, hopefully the idea is that once the new year starts, my YouTube channel would come out with at least one new video every month. That is my current plan. We'll see how it turns out. I'm sort of
see how the dice roll.
Right. I'm sort of in the works on some things right now. But yeah, another thing about the WABAN YouTube channel, though, is pretty soon we're going to start having gaming videos on there. I've mentioned it multiple times already at this point. It's just a slow process because, people have busy lives. So, we have busy lives as well. So it's hard to kind of, but yeah.
I need to figure out editing.
Right. Exactly. So, so Cub here has been doing the editing for them, and so he's kind of like learning editing for the first time, so it's takes a little bit of time, which So that's fun. But yeah, so we'll be doing gaming videos. Portal 2 are Portal and Portal 2 are the first 2 games we're doing. So
Yeah.
so those will be out eventually. Yeah. And there are multiple other places you can listen to the WABAN podcast. I don't know where you're listening to it now, but there are multiple audio platforms you can listen to it on as well. That being Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. So yeah, you should be able to listen to it on all those platforms. If you just search WABAN on any of those, you should be able to find it, whichever platform works best for you. And you can also expect a new episode of WABAN every single Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. So yeah. Anyways, that's about all we have for this week. Thanks for listening. I've been Nim.
And I'm Cub.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.